So good afternoon once again. Please, can you see my screen? If you can see my screen, please signify. I want to know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, so let me mute everybody to be on the same page. So now, as I was saying, I said this is SA302 class. We have done justice with study session 1 and 2. We are going to start with study session 3 today. And the study session 3 is service costing, or what we can refer to as operating costing. So it's still the same thing. If you say service costing or operating costing, the two terms can be used interchangeably. So in our last class, we discussed about product costing, but this one we'll be talking about service costing. So before I start this lecture, I want us to be conversant with one thing. Anytime you are in class, try as much as possible to get your pen and your jotter, because not everything inside your manual will be passing across to you. There might be something that you need to write down or jot down, which might be of help in the exams or even in all the areas of life. So now, last session, we talked about product costing. So this class now will be talking about service costing. So at the end of this lecture, we'll be able to understand what service costing is all about and to give relevant examples of service industry that are engaged in service costing. Then we should be able to differentiate between service industry and manufacturing industry. The one we were talking about before can be categorized under manufacturing industry. That is the product costing we discussed. Then we should be able to discuss the unit cost measures adopted by various service industry. And lastly, we should be able to explain how to determine cost per service unit. So that's the reason why we are here today for the following outcome. So the first thing is service costing. But before we move to service costing, I want to ask a question. What exactly is service sector industry is all about? When you hear the word service sector, because service costing is applicable to service sector industry. So what exactly is the word service sector? I need a response. So this is going to be an interactive class. So I need a response. What is service sector? I need someone to talk. What is service sector? That's my question.
Sorry, sir. Can I talk, sir?
Yes, you are free.
They are the sector. They are the part of the economy that they don't have a particular product. Instead of product, they render essential services.
Thank you so much. That's what I want to hear from you. So when you are talking about service sector, do you understand? So we'll be talking about some sector that produces services.
Like they don't have a tangible product that we can point to. I would say, like I'm sure.
Good. What they are interested in is intangible products in service sector. So, and if you look at the service sector that we are having in Nigeria, you discover that the service sector is a fastest growing sector and having a significant contribution towards the gross domestic products in Nigeria. So that is why it's always is regarded as an important sector where the role of the cost and management accounting is inevitable. So we cannot, as either cost accountant or management accountant, so we must be able to ensure that the service industry is properly worked into as an accountant. So if you look at the competitiveness of a service entity, they are very much dependent on a robust cost and management accounting system for competitive pricing or identification of value-adding activities. So that is why if you look at all these transportation industry or sectors, hotels, financial services, banking services, insurance services, electricity generation, those are the service sector industry. Do you understand? So without wasting much of our time here, let's try to look at what service sector is all about as regards the manual. Can you see the screen again? Hello, can you see my screen?
We can't see your screen.
Okay, this is it. Have you seen it now?
Yes, you're sharing your screen now, sir.
Thank you. So what we are saying here is that we understand the fact that the service sector industry, they are very, very important industry in Nigeria because they contributed majorly to the Nigerian GDP. So now we need to understand how the costs, when we are talking about product costing, we'll be talking about how to cost a product. In this case, how do we cost a service? Do you understand? That is why the knowledge of service costing is what is necessary. So service costing is used when an organization or department provides a service. unlike manufacturing company, what they provided is what? Is a product. So this is a costing method that is concerned with establishing the cost, not of items of production, but of services what rendered. So the services that you render as a sector or as an industry is what we are interested in as an accountant. So now service cost can be used by a company operating in a service industry or by a company wishing to establish the cost of services carried out by some of their departments. Service organizations do not make or sell tangible goods. So that's what makes the service industry differ from manufacturing industry. One is producing a tangible product, while others is producing what? Intangible product. So now, service or operating costing, when we started the class, I said you can refer it to as what? Operating costing. That same thing. So operating costing is used in an organization which provides services instead of producing or for goods. Despite the lack of tangible form, service outputs still have a production cost. A manager must be aware of the cost involved in order to run the business efficiently. That is the reason why service costing emerges. For the fact that you do not produce a product doesn't mean that you are not going to cost in every industry that produces what? Services. What they are producing is what we are interested in. So for calculating the price of each service, it is very necessary to collect all the expenses related to that service. So every expense associated with that service, let's take for instance, look at what we are doing here is a form of service, because what I'm teaching you here is intangible. It's not a tangible product. Do you understand? So every expenses that is associated with this particular teaching, do you understand? Has to be what? Has to be calculated. The price for each services for every expenses associated with it has to be what? Calculated. Like let me give you an instance. Look at the Zoom I'm using now. Do you understand? I'm using my data. Do you understand? All the prices of the expenses associated with this particular teaching has to be what? Has to be calculated. So a service cost sheet is prepared, which shows all the costs related to a specific service. So every expenses that is related to this particular teaching now has to be recorded in a what? In a service cost sheet. So that is that about service costing. So circumstances suitable for service costing. What are the circumstances surrounding service costing? So as we all know that service costing is used by companies in the following circumstances. One, a company operating in a service industry will cost services. A company operating in a manufacturing company will cost what? Products. Do you understand? But a company operating in the service industry will cost services for which sales revenue will be earned, such as electricians, car hire services, transport services, etc. So a company may wish to establish the cost of services carried out by some of the departments, such as cost of computer department, cost of fans for distribution, etc. So now, what are the examples of organizations that produce or that provide services? What are the examples of organizations that provide what? Services? We have transportation companies, we have hosting and domain, we have schools, we have hospitals, we have IBEDC, that is electricity services. Do you understand? So the transportation company we are talking about, what are the kind of services that they are provided? So they are providing transportation services. For hosting and domain industry, what are the type of services they are providing for us? They are providing what? IT services. So what the schools, what are the type of services? This is education services. So the hospitals, they are producing what? Or providing hospitality services. And the IBEDC that we are talking about, they are providing what? Electricity services. So this is in form of their products. So every service that they provided, every cost that is associated with those services has to be what? Recorded in what? In the cost sheets. Then we have service costing examples include the salary, the insurance, road tax, license fees, interest on capital, repairs, depreciation, petrol expenses, IT services related costs, So look at the salary we are talking about. Providing an educational services, for instance, we are getting salary at the end of the month. So that is the part of what? The expenses associated with what? Teaching. So insurance as well. We have road tax, we have license fees, we have interest on capital, we have repairs, we have depreciation, petrol expenses, IT service related costs. So those are the examples of service costing. So what are the difference between service industry and manufacturing industry? In this case, each of the industry, either service industry or manufacturing industry, they have what is referred to as outputs. So in the service industry, their output is what? The services that they are provided. And in the manufacturing industry, the products that they are provided. Look at Nezu Nigerian PLC. They are doing bottled water. So the bottled water you see, that's one of their products they are producing. Do you understand? The bottled water is not just produced. There are so many expenses, so many things that has been associated with producing the bottled water. Do you understand? So now, service industry also, they are producing what? They are providing services. Like what we are doing here now. The services we are providing here is lecture on ECD 302, station 3. So there are some expenses that are associated with this thing. So one of the expenses is the salary I'm going to collect at the end of the day. Do you understand? So now, let's just talk about the differences between the service industry and what a manufacturing industry, using some basis. One of the bases that we first of all talk about is the intangibility. So the intangibility in service industry is what? The output is intangible. That is, we cannot see it. We cannot see it. We cannot touch it. Look at the services I'm rendering now. You can only feel it. You cannot see it. You cannot touch it. Do you understand? But in manufacturing industry, look at it, the output at the end of which is the example of Nezu PLC that I said the other time. They are producing water. And the water they are producing is in what? Is in tangible form. We can touch it, we can feel it, we can experience it. Do you understand? So that is in form of what? Intangibility. In form of heterogeneity, the nature and standard of the service will be variable due to high human inputs. The input of human in service industry differs. So that is the reason why the output that you might derive from it might be what? Might be different. The nature and standard of the output is strictly on specification. Look at the bottled water we are talking about. If Nestle produce one particular bottled water, the bottled water will be the same size, the content will be the same thing, unless there is what? There is an error. Do you understand? So then the next line of action here is simultaneous production and consumption. How do they produce their products? The service we are talking about, what exactly does the service require? The service that you require cannot be inspected in advance of receiving it. But in the manufacturing industry, the output can be inspected in advance of receiving. You can inspect what is going to come out in manufacturing industry. But in service industry, even at times when you want to deliver a lecture, there are so many things that will come alongside, not that you have prepared for such kind of things. Let's say, for instance, if a student asks a particular question, do you understand? You don't even prepare for that questions before, but your response to that questions will be based on your level of experience. That can be what can be stopped. Do you understand? So that is that about the service industry and manufacturing industry. So the unit cost for service costing. When you are talking about unit costs, one of the things that will come to your mind is, are they talking about the measurements in services? I may mention of transport services. I made mention of electricity supply service, IBDC. I made mention of hospital industry. I made mention of hotels. We have IT, we have insurance, we have cinemas, we have canteens. What exactly is the unit of cost for this industry? So that is what we are interested in. And I said something, I said, method of ascertaining service cost unit needs to be understandable. And in this particular methods, we have just two. We have composite unit method and we have equivalent unit method. Once you have understand what composite and equivalent units is all about, you should be able to know what exactly is the cost, is the unit of cost that should be allocated or that should be associated with what? With particular service industry. Let me give an instance. When you are talking about transport service, you'll be talking about passenger. So what's unit of cost that you can use to measure passenger? Kilometer, if it is in a public transportation. We have a quinta, which is also measured in kilometer or ton, when you are talking about goods carriage. So we have IBDC, the electricity service industry. We have kilowatt hour, when you buy electricity now. So the unit that you are going to be given is in form of what? Kilowatt per hour. When you're talking about hospital, you'll be talking about a patient per day or room per day, that is the room allotted to patients per day. You'll be talking about per bed, you'll be talking about per operations. When we are talking about canteen, where you can go and eat, you'll be talking about per item, we'll be talking about per meal. Are we on the same page? When you're talking about, let me use another example. You look at the cinema, we'll be talking about when you go to the cinema now, you get tickets. We're talking about per ticket. That's the unit of cost associated with that particular service industry. Let's come closer to banking industry. We'll be talking about per transactions, per services. Do you understand? So those are the unit of cost associated with the service industry. So now, another interesting thing here is, if you look at the service industry that we're talking about, if you look at a cost per service and factors determine the quality and cost of service. A cost per service unit and factors determine the quality and cost of service. Cost per service unit. How do you arrive at a cost per service unit? You look at the direct materials, you look at direct labor, you look at direct expenses, you look at overhead absorbed, and at the end of the day, you total it together to get your total cost. In service costing, it is not uncommon for labor to be the only direct cost involved in providing a service, and for overheads to make up most of the remaining total cost. It is sometimes necessary in service costing to classify costs as being fixed, variable, or semi-variable. In service costing, you have to classify your costs as either fixed or variable costs or semi-variable. If costs are semi-variable, it is necessary to separate them into fixed and variable costs using the high and low method. What do I mean by this? You know, a fixed cost into fixed and variable costs. Do you understand? So the cost per service unit is calculated by establishing the total cost involved in providing the service and divide by the number of service units used in providing the services. So now, how do we now calculate the cost per service units? Total cost for providing the service divided by the number of service units. So then what are the factors determining the quality and cost of service? So from the manual, effectively managing service operations is crucial to controlling labor costs, and improving customer satisfaction. They successfully transform their manufacturing, research and development, and other business function, improving their performance while stripping out costs. Yet, far few have optimized their service operations, even though they can have an outsized effect on customer acquisition and retention. When service level and costs are properly balanced and optimized, they can deliver a substantial and sustainable competitive advantage that competitors will find hard to match. By their nature, service operations are often labor-intensive and complex to manage. Repetition and consistency, typically a hallmark of excellence in service operations, can work against a company that is trying to achieve step change improvement in processes and behaviors. Additionally, executives across many industries are finding it increasingly challenging to keep service costs in check, especially labor costs, the single largest cost component of any service operation. Labor costs is very, very important, while maintaining service levels. So what we are interested here is that, when we talk about the factors that determine the quality and cost of service, the importance of labor cannot be overemphasized. So now, the factors that they are now talking about have been identified responsible for determining the quality and cost of service, which are product and process design, service level labor requirements, service network structure, service process management, workforce management, and lastly, measurement and completion. All these 6 factors are very, very important, but the word labor cannot be stripped out. So the factors has been explained here. So that is that about the study session 3. But before we move, I want to say something about the cost per unit that we are talking about the other time. I said before you can understand the cost per unit for a service industry, you must first of all know what are the methods for ascertaining the service cost per unit. And I said we have 2 methods. We have we have composite cost units. We have composite cost unit, and we have equivalent cost unit. So these 2 methods needs to be explained. Under the composite cost units, we combine 2 measurement units to know the cost of service or cost of operation. Please, I want you to listen attentively. Under the composite cost unit, when you hear the word composite, 2 measurement units are combined together for you to get the service cost or cost of operation. For instance, a public transportation undertaking will measure the operating cost per passenger, then per kilometer. A public transportation now, you measure the operating cost per passenger, and you measure what? Operating cost per kilometer. So that's a perfect example of what? Composite cost unit. 2 measurement units are combined together. Another example is we have ton and kilometer. Another example is in goods carriage, we have quintal and kilometer. Another example is patient and day. So 2 ways are now required to compute composite units. We have absolute basis. The absolute basis is also known as a weighted average basis. And we have commercial basis, which is also known as what? Simple average basis. Any method you are using, either you are using absolute basis or you are using commercial basis, weightage is also given to qualitative factors rather than quantitative. That is, weights, which are directly related with what? Variable cost elements. So what do I mean by that? You know, the first thing that you do is you look at the weighted average, or what is referred to as absolute basis. So you have to summarize, or you have to sum up all the product of qualitative nature and quantitative nature. For example, to calculate absolute ton, then kilometer for a good transport, you say weightage carried multiplied by the distance plus weight carried multiplied by the distance. That is for the second one. Then you say weight carried multiplied by the distance until you get to the last point. So that is that. But when you are talking about simple average or commercial basis, it is the product of the average, either qualitative or quantitative factors. Do you understand? Let me give in case of a good transport, goods carriage, we have commercial ton, kilometer, which is arrived at by multiplying the total distance, which is kilometer, by average load quantity. So when we get to calculation, you understand what I mean by all this. So now let us look at one simple, I'll just share one simple calculation now. So we now look at it together. So be able to be at the same page. Let me share the screen for the calculation. So now, look at this question. They said a lorry starts with a load of 20 MT of goods from station A. Who can tell me the meaning of MT? Hello.
Metric tons. Metric tons.
God bless you. So now, it unloads 8 metric tons in station B and balance good in station C on return trip. It reaches station A with a load of 16 MT, loaded at station C. The distance between A to B, B to C, and C to A are 8 kilometers, 20 kilometers, and 160 kilometers, respectively. Compute absolute metric ton kilometer and commercial equivalent metric ton kilometer. The first thing that comes to your mind is, how many stations do we have? Do you understand? How many stations do we have? If you look at the question, we have just 3 stations. ABC. Do you understand? To compute the weighted average or absolute basis in metric ton kilometer, what we just need to do is, A, lorry starts with a load of what? 20 metric tons. What is the total distance? It unload 8 MT in station B. So what is the total distance covered from A to B, which is what? 80 kilometers. So 20 metric tons multiplied by 80 kilometers. For the second one, it unload 8 metric tons in station B and balance goods in station C. On return trip, it reaches station A with a load of what? 16 metric tons, loaded at station C. The distance between A to B and B to C and C to A are 80 kilometers, 120 kilometers, and what? And 160 kilometers. So with the station C now, we have 16 multiplied by what? 160. So, but there's one thing that is said. If you look at it, unloads 8 empty in station B. That shows that from B to C now, it will remain what? 12. Because the lorry starts with what? With 20 metric tons. Then when it gets to B, it unload 8 out of the 20. So for B now, we have what? 12 metric tons. So the first, which is A, is 20 multiplied by 80. The second, which is B, is 12 multiplied by 120. And for C, we have 16 multiplied by 160. That is how to arrive at what? Weighted average or absolute basis metric tons in kilometer. When you want to use the simple average or commercial basis, the first thing that you do is you look at the total number of metric tons. We have 20, 12, and 16. 20, 12, and 16 is what? 32, 48. So what is the average? 48 divided by 3. Do you understand? So you now multiply by the total number of what? Kilometer. And we have 80 kilometer, 120 kilometer, 160 kilometer, making 360. 360 multiplied by the weighted average, which is 16. We'll be giving, we arrive at what? 5,760 metric ton kilometer. That is just a simple way to calculate weighted average or absolute basis and simple average or commercial basis. So that is the way we are going to draw the curtains for today's lecture. So if there's any questions, reactions, so comments, I think this is the best time to ask. Hello, please, I'm listening. If you have questions, queries, contributions. So, okay. In the absence of questions and reactions, I think we should call it a day. Right?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
So
sir.
read ahead for the next class. So stay social for by God grace. Take good care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye,
sir.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.